Thank you very much, and it's good to see so many people here. Didn't realise we had so many people in Kent and Medway, but so welcome. This is a really important day, I think, because it sets, I think, the tone, not least for what we've achieved over the last year, but more importantly, what we have to achieve over the next year and going on. To start, and I've been told that I have a number. I don't know if any of you have seen what this number might mean. It's not a sort of conglomeration of the date, by the way, but I'll come back to that in a minute. But many of you will know that I used to be a finance man many, many years ago, before I saw the light and decided to become a chief executive. And I was a chief executive in acute trusts for the last 17 years. Which seems like a sentence, doesn't it? But so I saw the light and decided that the issues in Kent and Medway were such, and the opportunities were such, that it felt right to me to step out, as Ruth has said, from being an acute chief exec and try to do the best for the whole population of Kent and Medway. And I have worked and lived in various parts of Kent and Medway throughout my life, so it's not unknown to me. But as I say, I suppose as a former finance man, you might think of numbers. And what's prompted this number is one of my daughters has just spent time in Malawi teaching English. And she got back at the end of last week. And, quite scary. I guess she's 19 and, out for the first time, if you like, on her own in a foreign country in a very strange environment. So you might think, there'll be a whole raft of things that new experiences that might have perhaps scared her or been a challenge for her. So when I asked her the question, what is the thing that caused you the most angst during the time you were in Malawi? It was, I don't know if anyone would guess, if you've got 19-year-old daughters, it might be the lack of suitable boyfriends, it might be difficulty getting alcohol. She obviously takes after her father in that respect. No, it was none of that. It was, couldn't get Wi-Fi connection. So coming back to the number, 2617 is actually the number of times people either touch or move or do something to their smartphone in a day. Quite scary, actually, isn't it? So I'm looking at the moment and saying, well, by the law of averages, quite a few of you must be touching your smartphones at the moment. So, and we've actually probably helped that actually by saying you've got to log on to the Wi-Fi and use this to do that. So it just shows, I think, how much it's taking over our life. So in the context of this, you could look at that quite a lot of different ways. It's a whole new medium, isn't it, for people to interact and get together. And actually we need to use that, in a positive way. Its impact on healthcare as well, I think, is immeasurably. And one aspect, another one of my daughters has diabetes as one of her things, and she had real problems, and has real problems sometimes in keeping it in balance in terms of that. Well, she has a Wi-Fi app now, and all that sort of, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. And teenage girls in particular can be quite difficult at actually getting them to because of the consequences of diabetes. But actually, you put it on a Wi-Fi app and she does it magnificent because it's actually talking to her in the way she is. So just a couple of small kind of illustrations in terms of that. But I think the really important thing is about communication, getting together, and I think the STP, frankly, if it's done nothing else, is it's got people talking and got people communicating. I think there's still a way to go in that, but actually that is really important. And just before I go on to the Kent and Medway at a glance, which I won't spend long on, health and social care have circled around each other for a number of years. I genuinely believe that we've started to crack actually the fact of working together in harmony as part of this process. There's a long way to go, and it will be rocky road, but I think the building blocks are in place to do that. And I'll just use one further analogy. I used to work in Northern Ireland many years ago now, and aside from some of the sort of vignettes that I could say about life in Northern Ireland, particularly it puts a whole new complexion on some of the problems that we face in health and social care. But health and social care in Northern Ireland were combined and have been combined for a long time. But I'll tell you a little story. I worked at the Southern Health and Social Services Board, and it had a headquarters which was a massive porter cabin in Lurgan. And you might think that people were working together in harmony, but you went in through the main entrance and you turn left for social care and right for health, and the only time they ever really met was at 5 every day when they were piling out of the office into the car park. I think the analogy of that is, just by putting them together doesn't necessarily make it work. So I think it's an important factor to bear in mind. This has to be real. So, moving on in terms of, I think most of you will be aware of this particular slide and the issues within it. But I think the really important thing around this is just some of the scales of the challenge. I mean, I think anyone who lives in Kent and Medway will realise that, certainly where I live, that virtually every piece of land seems to be being built on at the moment. And the consequence of that is, a huge increase over the next few years in the population that we serve. We spend, a very small amount of our budget in supporting people to stay well and prevent illness. And that's something I think we have to be much smarter at how we actually manage to make that work. I won't go into these in any great detail, but actually we've got a big population that have a big amount of problems. And I think, we all know that some of the deprivation issues, and we know that in some particular towns it's much worse than others. But even in towns that you think of as being very affluent, there are pockets of deprivation in there. And I think, we need to be clear that we're giving a health and social care service that actually works for the whole of our population, and not sometimes, as we've done in the past, provide a very good service or a good service for middle-class people. Particularly in an affluent area, which Kent and Medway generally is. We know we've got issues in terms of recruitment and other areas of that we need to address. We know also that we have issues around mental health, and we know as well that there are a lot of people that are in an acute hospital bed that actually need care but could be better treated in another area. Now, we often think that's about saving money, and maybe it is. It's about a whole raft of things. But again, using an analogy of my mother-in-law, who's actually in Aberdeen, so it's a different system and a different way. Actually, she spent best part of 4 out of the last 6 months in a hospital bed, when actually, for most of that period, she didn't really need to be there, which prejudiced her going back home at that point in time. That was the problem. It was the wrong place for her. She didn't want to be there. I would suggest the hospital shouldn't have wanted her to be there, though sometimes I have to say they didn't react in quite that way. But actually, it's the wrong place, and we're not putting people in the right place where they are going to be most comfortable and most beneficial. And clearly, money is an issue, and I come back to my financial piece. So, I think putting it very simply, we need to close 3 gaps. I've just illustrated them. The best health, the poorest health, the availability and quality of services people need, and the available services we deliver. These are all in mismatch at the moment, and we need to close those gaps. And our approach, I think, starts with helping people to stay well. And a lot of you here in this room have done a lot of good work in actually making that happen. But we need to do more, and we need to prioritise that. And as I say, be more imaginative in some of the schemes that we do. We do need to do more out of hospital. And equally, acute services need to be more effective. So acute services aren't always as effective as they can be in terms of delivering the care, and I use my mother-in-law as a good example of that. She'll hate me for doing that, by the way. But, mind you, she's 85, Scottish, and stubborn as a mule, so it's not really that surprising, perhaps. By the way, I'm Scottish as well, so I can say those sort of things and get away with it. So what are our priorities? I think, in the sense of an STP, STP started as looking at a plan for the future, but the future's getting here quite quickly. So we need to collectively focus on delivering winter. And I think the sad truth, perhaps, is the bellwether for winter is seen as A&E performance. So we all know that that's one measure and one part of the story, but it's an important one in terms of how we're judged as a system. I believe we need to improve stroke outcomes. It's a passion of mine around stroke. I just told you my mother-in-law had stroke. My father died of a stroke. I have a sad history of stroke in the family, so I'm getting to the age where I'm deeply concerned about that personally. We need to implement local care. We need to drive a solution for the issues around East Kent in particular at the moment, but going on into West Kent very quickly after that. And we need to progress what we call system transformation. And we'll hear something around all of these as we go through. And clearly, we talk about finance, and you think, is it about reconfiguration? Is it about doing something radically different? Actually, the vast majority of our savings will come from just basic productivity savings. So we can't lose sight of that. And we do need to make sure all of that is held together with a clinical strategy. So I won't bore you in a sense with the winter. We all know, I think, of the issues that we've got in terms of that and how seasons influence breaches. And we know that winter now is a 12-month-a-year phenomenon, but we also know that high degrees of complexity tend to peak around the winter, which cause us a degree of problems. In terms of stroke care, we know what we need to do. We're not achieving it across Kent and Medway at the moment. We don't have a hyperacute stroke unit within Kent and Medway, so we are behind the pace in terms of what other parts of the world have done. So if you look to the borders of us, Eastbourne and the Princess Royal at Farnborough are hyperacute stroke units, and then you go into a void in Kent and Medway. That doesn't mean to say we're not giving good care, but we're not giving optimum care to our patients in stroke. In terms of local care, we know, and you'll be familiar with Dorothy and the way Dorothy is used to personalise how we deliver local care. It's sporadic. There's some really good practice around Kent and Medway. We need to make sure that that is aligned and developed across the whole of Kent and Medway. And in terms of East Kent, I think most people are aware of the issues. We need to move on, and for no other reason, looking at what's happening this winter is how we contextualise how people want to work in an organisation and in a service which they see as sustainable into the future. And system transformation, I won't mention too much. We've got other speakers who will look at that, but actually we do need to develop a system and a management ethos around that system that helps us to deliver what we need to deliver. And one that actually looks around collective accountability, looks at population health and strategy, and integrates all of that together. So, people don't actually care which organisation provides their care at the end of the day. They don't see the lines that we put in the barriers of that. And certainly, it shouldn't be. And I can remember as an acute trust chief exec in the past writing, I probably didn't write, and I think I hoped to stamp them out when I did find them. It's, and the care transferred to the community trust or to the GP, and we put, you need to actually write to them to actually answer that bit of your complaint. Well, that's crazy, isn't it? So someone actually writing in needs to have a holistic view, and that's just a small vignette of how you illustrate that. And as I say, productivity, if you look at productivity, and we'll hear later, there's a significant opportunity across Kent and Medway to do that. And that's not about doing anything radically different. That's about doing what we do at the moment, but better. In terms of our clinical strategy, we really need to move on with that. And actually, it's often quite difficult to work out what the clinical strategy is. It exists, but it exists in a lot of different places. And one of our major issues at the moment is to make sure that we consolidate that together. And making sure all of these things are put together with other areas that are really, really important. And you'll hear about some of them today. And I've illustrated the digital agenda in terms of my analogy earlier, but things about making sure we've got the estates, making sure we're communicating adequately to the people out there. Again, Ruth has mentioned a myth around STPs and how they're secret. They aren't, actually. But actually, we need to go out there and convince people of that. And I'll leave you with one more number, which is the number of people that we're here to serve. There are 1.8 million people at the moment in Kent and Medway and it's going to get bigger, and they are depending on us and you, the people in this room. There is nobody else out there who's going to do this. We have a responsibility to do this and actually make the population in Kent and Medway get the best possible health care that we can within the resources we've got. Thank you very much.